Hey YNR fans! Waving hand, welcome to YNR Trends, your go-to spot for the juiciest Young and the Restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama you can't stop talking about. From surprise returns to scandalous twists, we break it all down for you, every day. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. Let's discuss how Sharon Newman might assume leadership when these catastrophes occur in Genoa City, as spoilers for the Young and the Restless suggest that she may have 3 fires to put out. 1. When Phyllis approaches too closely, does Sharon mark her territory with Nick? First of all, Sharon can encounter a well-known issue with Nick Newman and their customary romantic roadblock. Since Phyllis Summers has previously gotten in Nick's way, Sharon will definitely not want her to do it again. Victor Newman's blackmailing of Kane Ashby will cause some friction between Phyllis and Nick, but it might not last long. Fans of YNR are aware that Nick has a talent for soothing Phyllis and preserving their friendship. Naturally, problems might arise if Phyllis and Nick's friendship threatens to stray from the friend zone, as it has so frequently done in the past. In the upcoming episodes, Sharon might detect that possibility and claim her territory with Nick. Sharon might take charge of the matter and not allow Phyllis stand in the way now that Nick appears more willing to resume their romantic relationship. 2. Does Sharon confront Daniel about pursuing Tessa? Sharon may then confront a danger to Mariah Copeland's marriage. Tessa Porter was forced to separate from Mariah, but Sharon might give them hope that they can reconcile. If Sharon notices any indications that Daniel Romolotti Jr. is stealing Tessa for himself, she may step in to stop it. If Sharon sees Daniel having a private time with Tessa, it's easy to picture her confronting him. Sharon might encourage Daniel to distance himself from Mariah's marriage so that they can work things out. Sharon might take any necessary action to prevent Daniel from approaching Tessa if she believes he is causing too much temptation. 3. Does Sharon set up Mariah's legal assistance? If Mariah's stranger smothering secret is revealed, Sharon may also set her up with some legal assistance. Sharon might enlist Michael Baldwin to defend Mariah as well, as he stood up for her when she was accused of being responsible for the terrible destiny of Heather Stevens. Sharon would plead with Michael to save her daughter from the situation, but Mariah might ultimately prefer to enter a guilty plea and accept her sentence. Michael might employ a temporary insanity defense or another tactic that focuses on all of Mariah's experiences with Ian Ward's trauma. In any case, you can be sure Sharon will exert every effort to prevent Mariah from going to jail. Stay tuned for all the shocking news that lies ahead, because spoilers for the Young and the Restless indicate that Sharon may be able to put out these 3 fires and possibly more. Whether she wanted it or not, Sharon had always been the type of woman who ended up at the center of pandemonium. Genoa City had often put her fortitude to the test over the years, and she had become accustomed to picking up the pieces when others were too rattled to do so. However, it was evident that she had been thrust into a completely other kind of tempest the week she was confronted with not 1, not 2, but 3 emergencies that required her immediate response. Sharon understood deep down that she couldn't prioritize any one of the disasters, even if each one had its own weight and emotional fire to extinguish. They were all blazing at once, and lives would be destroyed, some permanently, if she didn't take immediate action. Her family disintegrating in before of her eyes was the first fire. Nick had a heated argument with their daughter Faith over a decision that appeared minor at first glance but severely damaged their trust. Nick was still emotionally damaged from everything he had gone through with Sally, Sharon, and the never-ending struggle in his personal life. Faith demanded more independence than Nick was willing to provide, and Sharon was left powerless to stop the father-daughter arguments that brought back too many memories of her own previous transgressions. It was about Nick's fear of losing yet another member of his family, not about vehicle keys, late-night study sessions, or the limits of young adulthood. Sharon heard the sharp edge in Nick's voice that only emerged when his anxiety overcame his logic, saw the shaking in Faith's hands as she attempted to defend herself, and knew then that she had to intervene. Before their comments caused scars that would last far longer than any of them had intended, she had to put out the fires of rage. Sharon's role was sensitive. If she interfered too much, Faith may feel like she was being singled out. If she interfered too little, Nick's stubbornness might crush the girl's requests for independence. She reminded Faith that independence came with responsibility and earned trust, and she reminded Nick of the times his own father's control smothered him by carefully picking her words like precisely calculated droplets of water over a fire. In order to have both sides see one another as family rather than enemies, she channeled the embers of anger toward understanding. By the time she was done, Faith's tears had stopped, Nick's tone had softened, and although the problem wasn't entirely handled, at least there was no longer any resentment in the room. Even still, Sharon was aware that this was just the first of the 3 fires, and she was already feeling exhausted. However, because it originated from the intricate entanglements of the heart, the second fire blazed hotter and far more erratically. The tangle Sharon found herself in, between Chance, who leaned on her in ways that made her wonder where their friendship ended and where romance began, and Adam, whose presence in her life had always been a storm she both feared and couldn't resist, was nothing like the romantic drama she had spent years navigating. The catastrophe occurred when the 2 guys appeared to approach her simultaneously and demanded answers she wasn't prepared to provide. Chance arrived to Crimson Lights with a disappointed expression on his face and admitted that he felt rushed and that he thought he was simply another stop on Sharon's journey to something else because she couldn't describe what they were. Adam showed up before she could comprehend what he had spoken, his timing flawless in the worst way. Despite his charm and unwavering determination, Adam had his own agenda, and Sharon could tell that he, too, wanted her to make a decision that would change everything. This fire was about Sharon's own heart and her capacity to remain strong when 2 forces drew her in opposing directions, not about arguments inside the family or conflicts between parents. It wasn't that either man desired her, rather, it was their timing that made her face emotions she had carefully suppressed. If she went with Chance, she could lose stability when he eventually grew weary of waiting for her barriers to fall down entirely. She ran the risk of reopening the scars she had fought so hard to mend and allowing chaos to return to her world if she chose Adam. What if she didn't choose either? She ran the risk of permanently losing both friendships. Sharon's chest constricted as she became aware of how unjust it was to be expected to make decisions for everyone else's happiness all the time. However, she forced herself to react honestly rather than in a panic, even as the emotional fire blazed louder. She informed Chance that although she loved him very much, she couldn't guarantee a future based on unstable foundations. She also told Adam that although she would always care for him, she wouldn't let her be devoured by his fire once more. Both men were wounded by the words, but Sharon knew they had to be spoken. She took charge of her own story at that very moment, and even though the fire burned her, it didn't kill her. The 3rd fire, however, was the most deadly of all and was the one Sharon did not anticipate. It was about surviving, not about romance or family quarrels. After years of turmoil, Crimson Lights had always been her haven, where she poured her heart and soul, provided warmth for her people, and produced something enduring. However, a crisis that jeopardized not just her livelihood but also her sense of identity now confronted her beloved cafe. A rival company had opened up shop nearby, enticing clients away with flashy advertising, low costs, and promises of a more contemporary experience. At first glance, it appeared to be merely business, but Sharon quickly realized that there was more going on beneath the glitzy ads. The rival wasn't just aiming for the market, they were particularly targeting her. Sharon soon recognized that this was not a friendly rivalry as rumors circulated that Adam, or possibly even someone connected to Tucker or Audra, was involved in the plot. It was deliberate sabotage meant to discredit her and deprive her of the security she had so diligently sought. Sharon experienced anxiety for the first time in years as a result of the corporate betrayal, the worry of losing not only money but also the emblem of her independence. Crimson Lights was more than simply a coffee shop. It was the center of her healing and the place where she had taken refuge when her personal troubles almost overtook her. It was a more painful blow than she wanted to acknowledge to see it endangered by those with authority and no morals. However, Sharon realized she couldn't afford to mope about her situation when she sat in her office one evening and looked at the diminishing receipts. Her employees, her town, and even her family now depended on the coffee shop's stability, so it wasn't just about her. She then put on her work boots and got to work, planning marketing strategies, enlisting the help of friends, and even confronting the rival to let them know she wasn't going to give up easily. Although she had previously been undervalued, she was resolved to show that Sharon Collins Newman Rosales was not someone to be taken lightly. The fact that all three fires struck Sharon at the same time only made them more devastating. She was not allowed to extinguish one before speaking to the others. She had to balance the erratic emotions of Nick and Faith, the conflict between Chance and Adam, and the danger to her company, all the while keeping her cool and continuing to be there for everyone else in her social circle. Nights turned into mornings, and she repeatedly saw herself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the weary lady who was staring back at her. But despite her fatigue, Sharon found a strength that took her by surprise. Every choice she made, every boundary she set, and every moment of composure she made herself call for was evidence that she had matured, that she had learnt from her years of failure, and that she was more than simply a survivor. She was starting to take charge. She was aware that the struggles were far from finished, and it wasn't easy. Nick's protective tendencies would continue to clash with Faith's independence. Adam and Chance would constantly push her emotional limits. Before it subsided, the business conflict would intensify. However, Sharon had confronted the fire directly, refusing to allow it to destroy the life she had created. Strangely enough, the tragedies had compelled her to take full advantage of her abilities and remind everyone around her that she was a woman who could save others, not a woman who needed to be saved. One evening, as she shut up Crimson Lights, with the scent of coffee and tenacity still permeating the air, she made a vow to herself that she was determined to keep, no matter how many fires broke out, she would never give up trying to put them out. A clear, forward-thinking vision, the capacity to motivate, and the strategic understanding to steer an organization toward its long-term objectives are frequently linked to the idea of leadership. The ability to manage crises, the quick, decisive, and frequently draining task of facing and putting out the fires that invariably erupt within every complex enterprise, is an equally important, but less glamorous, aspect of effective leadership. The ideal leader who takes charge when disasters arise is not just a reactive but a strategic figure who recognizes that how they handle severe, disruptive situations can affect the organization's overall health and future. Although the particulars of these fires might differ greatly between sectors and situations, they frequently fall into one of three disastrous categories: the existential financial crisis, the destructive internal cultural collapse, or the catastrophic exterior reputational catastrophe. The way a leader handles these three different conflagrations determines their tenure and legacy. A leader's actual strength is tested in the flaming crucible of today's emergencies, not in the peaceful preparation of tomorrow. The financial crisis is the first, and possibly most terrible, fire a leader must face. This is a fire that threatens the organization's very solvency and operational sustainability. It is not just a poor quarterly report or a small budget overrun. It may show up as the unexpected demise of a crucial investment or market, the abrupt and catastrophic loss of a significant source of income, a liquidity crisis that prevents the business from meeting its responsibilities or paying its employees, or the uncovering of serious, systemic financial misconduct that has been simmering for a long time. This catastrophe is characterized by its terrifyingly short fuse and its harsh tangibility. An organization's cash flow is its lifeblood, and when it is interrupted, it quickly starts to suffocate. A leader cannot afford to be a visionary in such a situation. Instead, they must become a chief fireman, whose activities are marked by brutal transparency, radical priority, and unalterable decisiveness. A harsh and prompt appraisal must be the first reaction. No matter how unpleasant, the leader must insist on a full and honest depiction of the financial situation. In order to obtain direct access to raw data, this entails avoiding the standard reporting channels. To determine the complete extent of the harm, forensic accountants or reliable external auditors are frequently enlisted. The leader must be fully aware of the amount of money available, the amount owed, and the due dates for those bills. There is no opportunity for deception or postponement. This procedure involves both financial planning and psychological readiness. Before guiding others through the awful reality, the leader must face it themselves. A triage list is the result of this evaluation. Which responsibilities are the most urgent? Which assets are easily liquidated? Which expenses can be immediately stopped? This is the time for survival economics, not long-term strategic investments. During a financial crisis, communication is a delicate and crucial tightrope walk. The leader needs to be open and honest on the inside, which is frequently uncomfortable. They must give enough truthful facts to stop the widespread rumors and panic that inevitably occur in such a setting, even though they might not tell every employee every gruesome detail. They must acknowledge the difficulties while presenting a sense of control and convey a clear, if somber, plan to get the situation under control. The focus switches to important partners, investors, and creditors on the outside. The most precious asset in this situation is the leader's credibility. They must provide a believable, workable recovery plan in addition to a sober, truthful description of the circumstances. The downfall will only be accelerated by empty promises. This frequently entails challenging discussions on restructuring terms, emergency funds, or extensions. Sometimes the only collateral a leader has left is their assurance and physical presence. Being decisive is crucial during this procedure. Painful cuts must be made quickly and transparently, whether they affect employees, projects, or entire divisions. Half measures or procrastination in the face of a financial fire only serve to fuel the flames and consume more of the company. In order to ensure that the organization survives to fight another day, the leader must make those difficult decisions, take responsibility, and carry out the strategy with determination. The second fire, an internal cultural disaster, is more pernicious and ultimately more detrimental to an organization's long-term health, even though it is sometimes less spectacular at first than a financial collapse. This fire burns through the company's human fabric, its morale, trust, and feeling of purpose, rather than through bank accounts and spreadsheets. A wide-ranging, discouraging round of layoffs executed with extreme insensitivity, a deep and bitter division among staff that shatters collaboration and poisons the work environment, or a toxic, high-performing executive whose behavior has been tolerated for years but is finally exposed can all set off this conflagration. Whispers in the corridor, declining productivity, a mass departure of top personnel, and a generalized feeling of fear, cynicism, or indifference are all contributing factors to this catastrophe. A leader entering this kind of crisis cannot combat it with plans for restructuring or financial instruments. This fire calls for an entirely other set of tools: compassion, honesty, and a strong dedication to psychological safety. Once more, diagnosis is the first step, but this time it's a very human one. The leader needs to pay attention. This entails going well beyond official surveys or human resources reports. It calls for one-on-one discussions, small, private focus groups, and anonymous feedback channels where the leader's main responsibility is to listen without getting defensive. Finding the source of the cultural decay, is it a lack of faith in the leadership, is the aim. A sense of unfairness, perhaps? A fear of reprisals? A decline in trust in the company's purpose? The leader will experience sadness, rage, and criticism during this extremely taxing process, much of which may be aimed at them or their predecessors. They must take this in stride, admit the suffering, and validate their colleagues' experiences. Following the identification of the fundamental problems, the leader must take strong symbolic and substantive action. No matter how valuable they are monetarily, if a toxic person caused the situation, they need to be fired. Any other action would be a declaration of the meaninglessness of the company's declared ideals. If a lack of transparency is the problem, the leader needs to start talking too much, revealing the good, the terrible, and the ugly, and giving the why behind tough choices. If a culture of silence is the issue, the leader needs to show that criticism is welcomed and not punished by aggressively rewarding individuals who voice their concerns. In order to do this, the leader must set an example of vulnerability, accountability, and an unwavering commitment to restoring confidence. They must paint a vivid and convincing picture of the inclusive, respectful, and purpose-driven culture they are attempting to establish, and then make sure that every system, from recruiting and promotion to performance evaluations and incentives, is in line with this new culture. A cultural fire must be extinguished gradually by smothering the embers and gently fostering fresh development. It cannot be hurried, and any perceived lack of sincerity will make the fire rekindle with much more ferocity. Given that the organization's future creativity, innovation, and resilience are wholly dependent on the well-being of its human core, the leader bears the responsibility of serving as its main psychologist, ethicist, and role model. The external reputational catastrophe is the third major fire that a leader must battle in the public square. This kind of catastrophe can occur with frightening speed and scope in our digitally enhanced, hyper-connected society, frequently beyond the organization's capacity to manage the narrative. A product malfunction that puts public safety in jeopardy, a widely shared film exposing unethical staff behavior, a catastrophic data breach that exposes consumer information, or public accusations of misconduct that cause a media frenzy and social media outcry could all be examples of this catastrophe. Trust and credibility in the eyes of consumers, the general public, regulators, and other stakeholders are the currency that is being attacked here, not money or culture. A never-ending, round-the-clock news cycle and the court of public opinion, where perception and emotion can take precedence over facts, are the main causes of the fire. Being the primary communicator and the person ultimately responsible for the situation is the leader's job in a reputational conflagration. Now, using the antiquated strategy of deny, delay, and deflect is like adding gasoline to the fire. These days, speed, openness, and humanism are essential. Acknowledgement must be the initial reaction. The leader needs to express that they are aware of the situation and are treating it very seriously, even before all the details are known. Silence is taken to signify guilt, ignorance, or indifference. Rather than using corporate legalese intended to restrict liability, this first statement must convey sincere empathy and care for anyone impacted. A leader will not pass the human test if they read a lawyer-written script devoid of soul. The audience must witness a human reaction, one that demonstrates regret, care, and a determination to put things right. The leader must take on the role of the primary, reliable information source as the situation develops. Regular updates are required, even if they only state that the inquiry is still ongoing and that more details will be released at a later date. This shows control and feeds the rumor mill. Importantly, the leader must accept responsibility for the organization and provide a complete and unwavering apologies when errors are discovered. A detailed description of the specific actions being taken to repair the damage that has already occurred, look into the underlying reasons, and make sure that the failure doesn't happen again comes next. Instead of hiding behind spokesman, the leader